Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at Facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to the iTunes store, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and review for us. Maybe that'll inspire Apple to promote us a little. And of course, you can also promote us by telling people about the podcast on social media or however else you publicize the things you like. You can support the Virtual Memories Show and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSpod and set up your level of support. You'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. All right, things are still hectic and unpredictable, but I'm getting by. On Saturday, I left the house at 8:30 in the morning to head into New York so I could record 4 podcasts in 3 boroughs, and that was Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. It all wore me down pretty badly. It was a lot of driving, a lot of dealing with New York traffic, and then walking from site to site, and, well, just overall, I never had time to get lunch, although I did stay well caffeinated, and got pretty run down by the whole process. And on top of that, right at the tail end, I got some crazy news that meant I needed to hurry out of New York and get back to the hospital in New Jersey, where my old man is. So I walked in the door Saturday around 9:30 p.m. And that was most of my weekend. That was half my weekend. The other half was spent recovering from it. I'll admit, briefly, I had the why the heck do I do this to myself thing during part of the drives, but you know, we've gone over this a million times. The podcast gives meaning to my life. It zeroes out my karma. Otherwise, serves as a creative outlet so that I don't have to prove myself to be a failure as a writer. So that's why I stick with this. Now, with that out of the way, it's on to another week. I am off to Toronto to host a networking dinner at my day job and to attend the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, where I'm planning to record a bunch of shows. So if you're doing the math, that means there's going to be a whole lot of episodes in the pipeline, which ought to give me some flexibility to deal with the unpredictability of my old man's health. And that brings us to this week's guest, who did a great book about her parents' deaths. Roz Chast appeared on the podcast in 2014 when that book, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant, came out, and we had a really good conversation. I've adored Roz's neurotic, scratchy cartoons in The New Yorker for a bazillion years. And I will admit it's one of the holy crap aspects of my life that Roz and I have actually stayed in frequent touch since 2014. Just being able to one of us to drop the other one a line out of the blue is one of those like, wow, that's not where I thought my life was going. But anyway, a few months ago, Bill Cardelopoulos, who is in charge of programming for the MoCA Arts Festival, asked if I'd be interested in moderating a live session with Roz for MoCA in April. I was happy to sign on, and Bill and the Society of Illustrators, which owns MoCA, said it would be just fine to use the session as an episode of the podcast. So Roz and I sorted out the structure, which is that Roz would talk us through a slideshow of her cartoons for 15 minutes or so, and then we'd have a conversation along with some audience Q&A. And I would make sure to plug her new book, Going Into Town, A Love Letter to New York, which came out last fall from Bloomsbury, USA, which I just did. Now, as far as caveats go, there's no real caveats, except that the audience part of the Q&A is a little lower volume than the rest. We tried to repeat the question so that everybody, including you, could hear. Also, a couple of our comments, including the opening line, refer to some of the cartoons that Roz showed in that slideshow. But I can't include the slideshow in the show notes because it's Roz's material. So you'll just have to visualize. Here's Roz's bio. Roz Chast grew up in Brooklyn. Her cartoons began appearing in The New Yorker in 1978, where she has since published more than 1,000. She wrote and illustrated the #1 New York Times bestseller, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant?, a National Book Critics Circle Award and Kirkus Prize winner, and finalist for the National Book Award. She's also written What I Hate from A to Z, and her cartoon collections, The Party After You Left, and Theories of Everything. Her new book is Going Into Town, A Love Letter to New York, from Bloomsbury, USA. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Roz Chast, live from MoCA 2018. And this is the part we'll be recording, so now you can be more self-conscious. That's always good.
Okay, my shoulders will be up around here, yeah.
I should mention, by the way, Going Into Town, if you haven't bought that yet, they have it down in the, I think it's CBLDF at the exhibit hall. So take a look. Speaking of the freelance life, what is a work day like for you?
There's a lot of procrastination. And also, I have birds, I have parrots. So basically, I have, this is like so boring. My life is very boring. I don't go to bed until very, very late because I tend to stay up very, very late. So I wake up late, then I have to deal with the birds. That takes like a very long time. Then there's a lot of procrastination, that could involve like going online and doing all kinds of stuff. And then somehow I have really no idea how some work gets done. And then there's some dinner stuff that has to happen. And then there's more birds. And then that's basically it.
So I think it's the work getting done part we were interested in.
But I don't know how that gets done. I mean, it's somehow...
Does it start verbally or visually?
It usually does start verbally. Mm-hmm. I have a list of ideas that kind of just goes on all the time. You know, I don't have a notebook that would make it too easy. It's usually like scraps of paper in which I write down ideas that just occur to me every, day, just all on and off all the time. And I'm just jotting these ideas down. And I tend to work on other projects during most of the week. I mean, I'm illustrating a book for a friend, or other sorts of projects. The New Yorker stuff, I find that I like some adrenaline. It helps me, think up ideas better when I have a certain amount of pressure. So, that's when I take the ideas that I've written down during the week and sort of start playing. And that might be just like, 2 or 3 days out of the week, but the rest of the week is for other things. So
what have you gotten better at over 4 decades as a New Yorker cartoonist?
That's a really good question. I think
the follow-up is, what have you gotten worse at?
Yeah. Oh dear. Okay. I think one thing that I think I've gotten better at drawing, although a lot of people might argue otherwise. Perspective has always been this really huge mystery to me. I mean, I never, despite having gone to art school. Oh,
you meant visual. I thought you were talking emotional. Sorry. Go.
Well, that too. Yeah. Perspective has always been a mystery because I never really learned the rules, or if they were told to me, they didn't sink in. And maybe that has to do with math, or I don't know what. So I feel like that for me is an ongoing struggle. But incrementally, I feel like I'm understanding it more and more. And also, I think just being braver about saying what I want to say, how I want to say it. And that I think I've gotten better at.
It's a weird question, but your biggest book was about your parents passing in their late years. When you talk about that lack of fear, are there things in comics you could do now that you wouldn't have done while they were around?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I could never have written that book.
Well, yeah, because they died. But
yeah, but even just being...
are there jokes you're making now that you're like, I couldn't have made that if my mom was going to read this?
Yeah. Although not in the cartoons, because in the cartoons for the New Yorker, I always had that out of like, it's not about you, which, is like the biggest lie of all. But I could always use that as an out. Whereas with the book about my parents, it was all about them. So, yeah,
things change. And do you still feel different the way you did starting out as, a female New Yorker cartoonist and everything else?
I do. I do.
In a good way?
I think it's just part of being, I don't know whether most cartoonists feel that way, that they're just kind of like a little bit in their own worlds, and there's a sense of separateness in a certain way, and being different. And I don't know. Maybe that helps you sort of concentrate on your work, or you feel like that's the place where you can be most yourself, and less so with people, So.
Do you have an ideal reader or an ideal audience in mind?
No, not really. I mean, I think I'm kind of pretty self-absorbed. When I'm working, I mean, I'm thinking about the work. I'm thinking about what it is I'm trying to put on the paper or on the iPad, as the case may be, and what I'm trying to do. And that takes up so much of my mental energy that I don't really think that much about, I'm thrilled when other people respond to it, but I don't really think about it that much.
Is there a cartoon that people cite the most of yours when... You're Roz Chast, is that sort of...
They do. The book about my parents, I think a lot of people responded to much more than I thought people would. But the cartoons, I think that the Obit Man one, people do respond to that. There's a few. There's always ones that like, I can't, I'm always surprised like that. Like that's the one you're like, you didn't like that. But.
And you mentioned drawing on an iPad. On your Instagram feed, you've been posting drawings that you've been doing on the pad.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you? Knowing that your line is so scratchy on paper and seeing it smoother on the iPad, how has it been different for you?
Oh, it's really, really fun. Yeah. I mean, I really, really, I had tried different digital mediums before and did not like them, hated the Wacom tablet, did not like looking at this and then looking at that, and just could not get used to it. But drawing on the tablet is very fun. It's very, and I did a cartoon about this actually, which I posted to Instagram. It's very glidey, it's very smooth, and there's much less physical effort in on every level. It's like when you're drawing on paper, for one thing, yes, my line is scratchy because I use this sort of scratchy pen and I'm left-handed and I'm nervous, and all of that is sort of smoothed out by the iPad. And also when you make a mistake on paper, you have to do all of this stuff to kind of correct it. It's like, there's the whiteout, there's the patching, there's the cutting out, there's the, every page in my parents' book, if you looked at it, is actually this like collage of other bits of paper, and like taking this half of this page and gluing it onto that quarter of that page and another quarter of another page. So it's just physically much more complicated to correct mistakes. And the iPad makes it very, very easy. Like I had done this drawing recently, because I'm going to be on a panel later about Nancy, the comic, the Ernie Bushmiller comic, and I did this drawing on the iPad of Nancy facing Marina Abramovic, with that thing and I drew her in her, red dress, and she's like looking ahead, and Nancy is just, with those big black eyes, and she's just, and I realized that I needed to make Marina Abramovic's eyes even bigger and more like, and it was really easy. It was just like, and then I looked at her and said, oh, she also needs to be somehow leaning forward a little bit, just a little bit more intense, And so instead of having to like, oh, fuck, now I got to go to my studio. I've got to like make a patch. And then and then in the top of everything, I'm going to have to scan it and then like, do the clone tool to like get the patch out and all this other stuff. I was just able to kind of like, tilt, done, and then just send it off to somebody. I didn't even have to scan it because it's all digital.
So have you been submitting digital-only stuff so far, or are you still...
I draw on paper and then I scan because I actually like to have the paper, the object on paper. For the things you're pitching. For the things the New Yorker. That's all paper and...
Could you see yourself, though, going digital?
Not really, because I like having the object and also I sell the object. So that's like another way to make money. And since I didn't inherit a lot of money when my parents died.
It's a sad story.
It's very sad.
You can read it downstairs.
No, I mean, I'm not married to, it's another, why not have the object which you can sell if you want to make a living, So, and also it gives you a sort of record. I sometimes, the digital stuff though has its place, and I love drawing on the iPad, and there are jobs like I've done a few illustration jobs using it, and that's totally fine, totally fun, because I don't, not that I don't care about them, but I don't care about them to the extent that I care about the cartoons or the books, So.
Now, speaking of books, you've done long form. Going into town's a little different than the full narrative of can we talk about something more pleasant, but. Can you talk a little about the shift from doing gag panels to doing long form work? And going back and forth between them now?
It's definitely a different thing. I mean, when you do a long form, you don't want the reader to get bored. And George Trow, who's a wonderful writer, now gone, said that structure is what keeps the reader from getting tired. And I think that's true. So you have to think when you're doing a long book, what's your structure? What is the story you're telling, and what's the best way to tell this? And, where does it start? What's your middle? Where does it end? The cliche, the narrative arc. So you have to think about that. And in a cartoon, it's like, boom, it's much different. It's, beginning, middle, end is all there.
Did you catch the bug, though? Are you sticking with long form?
Oh, I like it. I like doing both. I mean, as I said, when I was showing the slides, I like to work. I like to actually keep busy, and I like to switch from one medium to another.
You had the Trump's Africa panel up there.
Yeah.
Have you felt much of an urge to overt political cartooning?
Not so much. Every once in a while something happens that, but it's really hard. I mean, I don't know if there's Trump supporters here, but
anyone? Just kidding.
It's really hard to make jokes about him because, even portraying him as a clown or a buffoon, I feel undercuts the seriousness of how awful he is, so sometimes I don't want to make any kind of jokes that make him seem sort of just silly.
Yeah, a clown as opposed
to a clown as opposed to somebody who's really dangerous.
Now, talking about going into town, the new book. How did your perspective on New York change you moved, I think, in 1990 out to Connecticut and the suburbs. No, the word Connecticut still fills you with that sense of dread. How did that change your New York?
Oh, well, I realized how much I had always known how much I loved New York. I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but growing up in Brooklyn, when I did, in the era that I did, Manhattan really was the shining city on the hill. And everybody, I couldn't say everybody because that would imply that I knew more than like 2 people, which I didn't. But I think that a lot of people I knew, if they had any ambitions, they wanted to get out of Brooklyn. And even now when people talk about Brooklyn as like young people and hipsters, it's such a small part of Brooklyn that they're talking about. I mean, Brooklyn is just huge. It's 2.7 million people. So Manhattan to me was really the shining city. And when I moved to Manhattan, I went from Brooklyn, I went to art school. Living on the Upper West Side, that was the first time in my life when I thought my life was not going to be a complete cratering shit show disaster. And I really did think.
Did you feel that held up over? I'm just kidding.
Oh, no. I felt like when I moved, I mean, even through RISD, even through art school, I felt like such a weirdo and so out of it and so terrible about everything I was doing, about myself, about my work, about that. The only good thing about it was that by the time I got out of RISD, by the time I got out of art school, I knew how shitty I was. I knew how bad I was, and I still wanted to do it, you know, which is a really powerful thing. It's like, I know I suck. There's nothing you can tell me new in this. It's not like I'm going like, I think I'm really great. Now, oh, you hurt my feelings. It's like, no, I know my drawings are terrible. I'm going to try to make them better, but this is what I want to do. And I'm not going to draw like you. I'm going to draw like me. And that's what I'm going to do, you know. So I think that going to RISD was really important to kind of, you know, toughen me up in that way. And living in Manhattan was the first time in my life. This very long, boring story. Anyway, sorry. It was the first time in my life that I felt like this wasn't going to be, I wasn't wrong. This was not a disaster. This was a good idea to live here and to be a cartoonist. So loved it, lived on the Upper West Side. Everything was great. Moved in 1978, had this like crummy little apartment with no stove, adored it. Everything's great. Met my husband, had 1 kid, things started to change, moved to Park Slope. Then, you know, having 1 kid, that changes everything, of course. And then 2nd kid. And then we moved or shortly before the second, my daughter was born, we moved to Connecticut. And that was really different. And first of all, I did not know how to drive. And so I was sort of a prisoner in the house. And I didn't realize how much I took for granted. Living in New York, like I knew how to get around. I knew the subways. I had, you know, learned the subways when I was 14. So I knew no matter where I was, whatever subway was near me, I would know how to navigate. And living out in Connecticut wasn't just learning how to drive. It's like when you learn how to drive when you're 38, you never feel comfortable driving. I mean, it's really, so I hated having a house. You know, I did not like having a basement. I didn't like thinking of the things in the basement. I didn't like seeing the wires. I didn't like seeing the pipes. I didn't like thinking about the furnace. I think we have a furnace. We either have a furnace or a boiler. There's some stuff in the basement. I don't even know what it is. I don't like anything about it. You know, I do like having a washing machine and a dryer. That's very nice, not having to get quarters to like do your laundry. Although my husband doesn't let me do the laundry because he's very fussy and I will just like throw the stuff in and like, I don't know, that's a whole other story. I'm good at folding. I'm telling you, this is really boring.
It's a skill.
So yeah, I hate living but the good news is that a little over 2 years ago, I got a small studio apartment back on the Upper West Side, 2 blocks from my old apartment, and I love it to pieces. Even though last night, this was really funny. I'm there and I love it so much. I cannot believe how much I love being back in the city and how much I love this little apartment. And I went out to get some milk for this morning's coffee. And as I'm coming back to my building, these 2 sort of like moron guy and his moron girlfriend are walking by my building. And he sort of gestures to her and he goes, this looks like the fucking projects about my building. And I think it was because like it's made out of like humble red brick and like the super keeps Christmas lights up year round. I don't know why, but like I couldn't believe it. It was just like I almost said something to him like, don't you be calling my building fucking projects.
Then you thought you needed to survive to get here.
And then I just thought, forget it. You're an idiot,
But how did that experience, though, change your view of New York?
Oh, well,
moving out to Connecticut and then this
I
new
realized
experience.
how much I loved New York and how much that was my home and how much I couldn't wait to come back. And every time I came back to New York, every time I got off the train in Grand Central, it was like, home,
I can breathe the fetid air.
Breathe the fetid air. Yes, exactly.
More cartoonist friends than non-cartoonist friends?
More artist friends.
Artist friends.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you think that stilts your view of mankind in terms of, socializing with people?
One of the many things.
True. You mentioned how your first child she shows her drawings to the men.
Oh.
You show your drawings to a woman now, as new cartoon editor at the New Yorker. How has that experience been? With you had Lee Lorenz, Bob Mankoff, and now the new editor. What's it like getting accustomed to a new editor?
There's always this shift when an new editor comes in, and I'm always like, oh God, I hope they like my stuff. The main thing is that she's the age of my kids, and so I kind of like that in a way. Though it seems like fitting because Lee was like. Kind of a father figure in some ways. And Bob Mankoff said to me, Lee was like our father because Bob also came in around the same time I did, and as did Jack Ziegler and Mick Stevens and Liza Donnelly and a few other people. He said, Lee was like our dad. I'm going to be like your crazy older brother. And Bob is about 10 years older than me. And Emma is, she's lovely. She's the age of my kids and I like her very much. And, but I don't really have that much personal interaction. I mean, at this point I do submit, digitally, make a PDF and send it.
But have you found is she buying different sorts of jokes than Bob or Lee did?
Ever so slightly. Yeah. I mean, I think that some of the more personal jokes, and I think, and this is something I was thinking about, I don't remember like what prompted this train of thought. I was talking to my husband about it, how I think that as women, we grow up, we read all kinds of stories that 99% of them star a boy or a man. And like even just something stupid like James Bond. It's like when I watch James Bond movies, I didn't fantasize about being like pussy galore. I mean, I put myself like, of course, you're not this like secondary kind of person that could really just be a sex bot. I mean, like a cyborg, with no interior, nothing. I mean, not that James Bond wasn't this cyborg himself, but I mean, all kinds of books, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry, like, were you Aunt Polly? Like, no, you were Tom Sawyer. And so you kind of grow up getting very used to sort of putting yourself in the frame of mind, whatever the hero of the book, whether they're male or female, it's not even that much of a big deal. You just kind of naturally do it. That's the story of Tom Sawyer. I'm not like waiting, oh, here's Aunt Polly again, goody, now I can identify, So now is a very interesting time because it's like, I feel like for many, many years, but it's been a very gradual shift. Like if I did a cartoon, the main character was a man.
Yeah.
Because that was the way it was. But now it's like I can make the main character, and she might be just as stupid as the guy, probably is. But and you're asking like men to do the same sort of shape shifting. It's like, well, why didn't more guys watch like Girls or Broad City or something? I don't know. It's just a kind of funny, and I don't even mean it in like a political way, just in a kind of like, we have done this sort of shape shifting our whole lives. And so to sort of say, well, see it from this point of view, and, just as a kind of like for fun, you know. It's not going to make your penis fall off, you know.
It could,
yeah. I mean, but, you know, just, you know, for fun, to sort of see it from the other side, or to kind of pretend like you're both people. So that's all. So I don't know. I feel like in some ways, because she's grown up with that, I feel maybe like a few, you know, notches more free to have the main character be female, and for it to not be a big deal, for it to not even like, oh, this chairman of the board is female, I wonder what the point of that is. But just like, you know, kind of like, well, you know, sometimes it's going to be male, sometimes it's going to be female, it doesn't really matter.
Do you, and I know you hate the self-aggrandizing thing, do you see yourself as a trailblazer in that respect?
My head is now going in here.
Do female cartoonists tell you that, you know?
I don't know. Making me uncomfortable.
We'll go to the audience. Anybody have questions? Start there.
Hi, I just have to say, I have a friend named Yale. He looks like he was drawn by you. Lumpy kind of look. You know.
Well, no, great posture.
And the snapshot, that's Washington Square looking up.
Yeah.
Okay, my question is, do you have any really favorite cartoons you couldn't sell to the New Yorker?
Oh, I do. Yeah. But I do resubmit. I mean, that is part of one of the fun things about resubmitting is I always, if I have cartoons that I've resubmitted 3 or 4 times, and I'll always like tweak it in some way because I still have hope. You know what Mort Gerberg is here, and he knows what I'm talking about. You still have hope. Like this one, there's something in here that's this is good. You know, after 4 times though, maybe it's like.
Although new editor now.
Yeah, that's right. Hey.
Cycle all over.
Yeah, exactly.
Question?
Roz, who were your influences? Any cartoonists you grew up that inspired you?
Oh, I think the first cartoonist I really fell in love with was Charles Addams. I mean, for so many different reasons. I think that really dark sense of humor really got me. I loved it. Also, his cartoons had children in them, and a lot of my parents subscribed to the New Yorker. A lot of the New Yorker cartoons were about boardrooms and things that are still kind of unfamiliar to me. But as a child, they were like, oh. But the Charles Addams cartoons I got, and I thought they were really funny. Also, Mad Magazine.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mad.
Oh yeah, the old Mad Magazine. I mean, really, they were revolutionary.
I got all the Argonies and
oh my God,
all these guys.
Like Don Martin.
I met everybody but Don Martin.
Yeah. I mean, that was the first place that I actually saw. Some place that was making fun of American culture. And I think as a child, like these ads, I knew that they were stupid. I knew that most of them were like, because as I said, I was middle-aged when I was like 5. And I knew that these ads were like really ridiculous and bad. It's hot. Yeah. Anyway, that was the first place that I really saw, American culture being made fun of. And the shows, the TV shows and the movies and just the idiocy. So.
Well, the other thing I want to ask you is, since you said, I'm figuring that Manhattan's become like almost like a Connecticut shopping mall now. So you see that, like a lot of these moms and pops places are going out and it's becoming what chain stores.
I mean, that is definitely true, but I don't think it's as bad as sometimes people say. I mean, there's still a lot of the old disgustingness left. And maybe, because I'm on the Upper West Side, I mean, Tip Top Shoes is still there, and those, Irish bars are still there, and it's still kind of like schlumpy looking and dirty and nice, and it's not as, if you go to certain areas, it's definitely like a shopping mall, like the Flatiron area, and Soho is ridiculous. It's like New Jersey or something. But nothing. Sorry. I always feel free to say, because I'm from Brooklyn, so like Brooklyn can insult New Jersey. You can.
Well,
New Jersey.
I'm from Brooklyn originally, but then I know the Upper West Side, Big Nick's and Lansky's is gone, and a lot.
I know. Utopia Coffee Shop is still there, though.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I know, but it clears. There's a lot that's gone, but a lot that is still there, and I still love it. And now my son is living up on, and his fiance, they're living up on 103rd, and it's still pretty grubby. Pioneer Supermarket is still there. Explain me that. I mean, nobody goes there. Nobody went there in the 70s.
The main explanation for that is Mog Front.
Mog Front. It probably is. And it still looks even dirtier than it did like 30 years ago. It is unbelievable.
More questions? You, over there. Yeah.
So you submitted your illustrations or your comics to the New Yorker, and they'll pick out the sketches for you to render them.
Yes.
Is there an application? Is there an application for that, or you just submit it automatically?
I'm not sure.
I think he doesn't. Roz is on staff at the New Yorker, so she's part of the regular people who submit. But I think you're asking about the submission process.
Yeah.
Submission process.
Okay. I submit. The deadline right now is Tuesday at noon, and I think anybody can submit. I submit usually 6 to 8 sketches every week. I make a PDF, and I send them. And then I find out by Friday whether or not they have bought one of the sketches. And then I do a finished drawing of that sketch, which I then scan and send it in.
Now, there's a documentary on HBO about Bob Mankoff, the previous cartoon editor, that shows a lot of like the pitch day process. You might want to look for that on HBO Go if you're stealing someone's password.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't remember, but look up New Yorker.
Very semi-serious.
Oh, yeah.
Very semi-serious.
Partially
Semi-serious?
Yeah.
Come on after we finish up, and I'll write it down for you.
Okay,
So, your question?
Early on, did you have any big mentors, and now are you kind of feeling like you're anyone's mentor?
The question was about mentoring. Yes, I feel like Lee Lorenz was a very important mentor for me when I was starting. And now, I mean, there are a few young cartoonists whose work I love, and it's, kind of come around in this funny full circle because now, I'm the age of their parents. So, yeah, it's nice. I like it.
I see a hand back there.
I had a question about transitioning to digital. Was that a difficult process, and what program are you using on the iPad?
Well, I still draw on paper for the New Yorker, and then I scan the sketches and make a PDF. So I still do most of my drawing on paper, and I'm illustrating a book for a friend right now, and that is done on paper. But drawing on the iPad, I use Sketchpad Pro and the Apple Pencil, just because that's what a friend of mine had and she taught me. And so now it's pretty intuitive. And it was not difficult. I really enjoy it. It's very glidey. It's very fun. As I was saying earlier, it's very easy to correct your mistakes. But I only do certain sorts of projects on them. Not if I think I might want to sell the original drawing later, then obviously I'll do a drawing on paper and then scan it, and then it can become a file. But there's an actual physical object, that still is there.
Do you see yourself doing live drawing like Liza Donnelly?
Not really. Okay. Not really. No,
I figure you're a little more.
Yeah, I don't think I will. Yeah.
What do you do when you get stuck?
Oh, when I get stuck? Oh, God. It's so, I'm glad you asked that, because people, I think they don't, for me, it's like constant writer's block. It's constant. There's constantly that voice that's just like, you suck, this is terrible. I think sometimes, sometimes if it's really, really bad, I'll just go make myself a cup of coffee and I'll just do something else for a while. Or work on like hooking the rug or whatever, if it's really just like, hitting a wall. But sometimes I'll go and I'll look at like old stuff, and maybe looking through old cartoons, something will jog an idea. Sometimes you just need to kind of get away though from the desk and then see it afresh. So Yeah, but it's. I think if you do this for a living, if you do anything creative for a living, I mean, unless you're like one of those people that writes those like 1,000-page, those 3 named authors that write those like Love's Tender Fury or Blossoms Cliffs Forever, or, and they just seem to turn out these like 1,000-page books. Unless you're that, I think most of us have that voice, the doubt voice. So.
Yeah, I'm a recent college grad, so how did you make money and stick with making art after school?
Oh, brother. Well, I have to say, I was so lucky that I knew I was lucky at the time, and a day doesn't go by that I don't consider myself very fortunate that I didn't start at the New Yorker. I mean, I did actually start. The first magazine I had a cartoon in was something called Christopher Street, which was a gay magazine that used cartoons. They were not porny or anything like that. In fact, I thought that they had 3 different cartoonists on staff. It turned out that they were kind of like New Yorker cartoons. But they were all done by the same person in 3 different styles. Anyway, they paid $10 a cartoon, which was shit pay even in 1978. And I did cartoons for the Village Voice, and I did cartoons for the National Lampoon. And it was less than a year after I was out of school that I dropped cartoons off at the New Yorker and started working for them. So I really was very, very fortunate. But I've always done... I remember Sam Gross... I don't know if you know his work. He's a wonderful, wonderful cartoonist. I remember him telling me really early on, he said, "You never put all your eggs in one basket." And I thought, look, that's really good advice, So, even when things are going well with the New Yorker, I also feel like Linda Barry once described cartooning, it's very rickety. And so, you always have a lot of different other things, try to just get your work in many different places. And don't, if you really want to do this, don't let other people push you around. Don't get discouraged. Just kind of keep going at it. So, I don't know.
Mark?
Over the years, Roz, obviously there's been a lot of changes in the magazine, in the New Yorker. From Sean and then Gottlieb and
Tina
and David. Do you think that it changed your view of the magazine about how your own work would be? I mean, obviously some editors would want more than others. And with those changes, what were the most outstanding ones, do you think, and how has it affected you with all?
I would say
So the question was about the changing of editors at the New Yorker over the years, and how it may have impacted Roz's.
I think the weirdest and the most, the one I had to think about the most in some ways, and the one that was the most unnatural to me was probably Tina Brown, who was, funnily enough, the only female editor the New Yorker has ever had, but she was obsessed with timely things, and that was not my strong suit. And I still remember when she took over, Lee Lorenz, and I didn't, well, let's put it this way. I didn't sell a cartoon to her for 4 weeks. And I thought, well, it's done. You know, she hates me because my stuff was just too weird or not timely enough or not like, wah, 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 joke, you know. And then I did something that was timely and they bought it. It had something to do with George Bush. I can't even remember what it was. And the funny thing about that is that when I've put together collections, almost none of the stuff that I published during those years makes it into the collections because they're all timely. And it's like, you know, I don't remember who half these people are. It's just stupid. It's just like, I don't want to do cartoons that, you know, sort of have a sell-by date. I'd rather do stuff that is, you know, hopefully meaningful a couple of years from now, you know, or funny, you know, not meaningful really, but funny.
You can be meaningful too. That's okay. Your work means a lot to these guys. I think we have time for one more question. Anyone gonna rapidly? No. My question is, Roz, can you sign my book?
Yes.
Cool. Again. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
that was Roz Chast. Her website is rozchast.com, which is spelled ROZCHAST.com. Her cartoons are in the New Yorker almost every week, and her new book is Going Into Town, A Love Letter to New York, from Bloomsbury, USA, who also published her great memoir, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant, and a fantastic compendium of her work, Theories of Everything, Selected, Collected, and Health-Inspected Cartoons, 1978 to 2006. Going Into Town really is a joy. It's a guide to New York through Roz's unique eyes. And I think our conversation gives you a good idea of what that perspective is like and what New York means to her. Now, I want to thank MoCA, the Society of Illustrators, and programming organizer Bill Cardelopoulos for inviting me to moderate this session and giving me permission to use it as an episode of the podcast. MoCA is always a fun cartooning festival for me, and the Society of Illustrators puts on great exhibitions and events at its location on East 63rd Street. Oh, and Bill's going to be on the podcast this fall around the publication of the annual Best American Comics collection, anthology, which he edits every year. Visit societyillustrators.org to learn more about the Society at MoCA, and search for Best American Comics online to learn more about that series. Now, because this was a live episode, I didn't get the chance to ask Roz, so, who you're reading, after we wrapped, but I promise I will do a phoner with her for just that topic in a few weeks. And if you want to hear her answer to that question, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The newest episode of that one features 40 minutes of new material from Dave McKean, Paul Karasik, Mark Newgarden, Seymour Quast, John Leland, Ann Hulbert, Henry Wessels, Lauren Weinstein, Jerry Beck, Willard Spiegelman, Levi Tadar, Jesse Scheidlauer, and Robert Weil. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. And there are all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that podcast, patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my new secret project that I'm just floundering on, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, we recorded this episode at the MoCA Festival in New York City, and that's on the west side. So basically, I just took the ferry over from New York. So it was $18 for ferry tickets, $12 for parking, plus, coffee, lunch, etc. I also got in that great Jaime Hernandez podcast the same day, so I consider this all money well spent. If you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or if you just want to toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. Special thanks go out to John Wendler, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Stephen Nadler, Wallace Willie Minozzi, Noah Van Sciver, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Garrett Zecker, Craig P. Steffen, Jack Lescamella, Joe Caruso, Paul Karasik, Michael Janizik, and Stephen Solomon for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. Next week's guest will be Michael Kupperman, whose amazing graphic memoir, All the Answers, comes out on May 15th. Till then, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube and tunein.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to the iTunes Store, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. That'll help us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.